Bernd, you gave emphasis for systemic thinking.
Yes.
So what is systemic and how this is useful in our day-to-day life?
Yeah. Systemic thinking is the way to look at reality. And it has different aspects. And it's not defined finally. There are some aspects of it to understand what I call the mobile idea. And I have many mobiles in my house, and from time to time I touch one part of the mobile and look very interested what happens in the interaction between all these parts. And systemic means to understand that we always have to do with living systems that are much more complex than these mobiles. And we usually do not really know how all the parts of this mobile interact with each other. But there are leverages in between. There are short leverages and longer leverages. And if we as an influencer try to touch elements with longer averages, is average the right word? No, levels? Longer levels? Leverages, not averages. Yeah. Leverages. Then we have. So should I start again at this point?
No, it's fine.
Cutting. So I try to understand which are the interactions that are important for what I'm looking at, and then try to touch the system at a point where through longer leverages there will be movement within the whole system. And systemic thinking is finding out which movements tend to go back into the old equilibrium, and you only seem to have changed something, but in the end it was balanced out by the system. Or on the other hand, we have this idea of the butterfly somewhere that can start a storm somewhere else. So we have also polarity and attention. Does an influence move a system only for a moment and then it gets back into the old patterns? Or can the system be moved in a way that further development is deriving from that? And this is one part of looking at phenomena and realities as systemic. So, and it's not only just saying, it's holistic and everything touches everything. There are many rules and many different cases where the system interaction have the one quality or the other. And we have to learn to understand which are the different qualities and how we can interact with them. And this is one part of systemics, the mobile idea. And the other part is the reality constructive idea. This is the sentence, reality is always the reality of an observer. And the way to observe, the eyes, the ears, the instruments, the models through which somebody observes, creates the outcome of the observation. And so it's not possible to understand reality without understanding attributes and interests of those who describe reality. When you transform this, for example, to defining company reality together, it's necessary that people who are important for this reality are understood in their viewpoint and in their interest and dialogue on this. Otherwise, you will not get a relevant reality for those who act.
This is very significant. I will summarize my understanding on what you said. So when you say mobily, it's also for in Indian context to understand. It's like the wind chimes. They are like with a lot of stems, and then they are hang. So when you touch one, they touch a lot of other pipes or pillars which are around. So systemic, you mean, is for one touch of that mobily, it creates a reaction or ripples. And you also say, as you see the movements, you see the shorter leverage points and longer leverage points, and you touch upon it. And sometimes we think that we have made a difference to only realize that they go back to the old equilibrium.
Right.
Understand how it is going to the old equilibrium, and maybe seeing a new leverage, touch it so that it creates a new equilibrium if necessary. And there is no clear formula for this. It is about able to study the quality of it again, again, and again, being
Right.
curious and open about it.
Yeah. And if you do not have the observations yourself, you need ask people.
Who
And
can
they,
come and share.
usually, if there is a trustful relationship, people offer you all the information you need if you only learn to ask them adequately.
Yeah.
And this is why learning to ask is so important for the systemic approach.
Yes. Yes.
And not to ask only why and how come and how was this in the past, but also questions if we would try an option, what new influences will come up and who will be for it and against it, and what are the soft facts and what are the hard facts that influence what will happen then. And so there's a cosmos of questions beyond the how come questions and what are motivations questions. And this is the enrichment that is very important for me beyond classical psychological questions, which are usually biographic oriented or motivation oriented.
And very significant what you're saying is about, now if you see the mobiles, they are only stems or rods, but if it is a system of humans, they are much more complex.
Right.
Then you also say the reality is always observers. So you are saying that it's very important to understand the viewpoint of the observer rather than teaching them something. That's where you sometimes are more interested to understand the observer's viewpoint through dialogue than giving them concepts or ideas, even in an organizational context. Because then it diverts the observer's viewpoint.
Right. Teaching is important to understand concepts and to share experience, but teaching is usually not much helpful to create reality.
That's a very powerful sentence.
And the systemic approach also is saying, as you said, we have to do with living systems. And living systems are not mechanical systems. So they have their own motivations and rules, and you probably never really understand them. And there was a sentence of Gregory Bateson, what was a great man, a philosopher and theoretical thinker, who said, if you have a rifle and you shoot now how you say, no, if you have let it make it more practical, if you have a football and you can exactly kick on that football, you will exactly know how it will fly and where it will be land. The ballistic way is very clear. If you hit a dog, it's different.
Yeah. If it is a sleeping dog and we try to kick like the football, I think the consequences are going to be very, very different. So what I understand by systemic is to embrace the complexity and be okay to understand the complexity and see how this interacts.
Yeah.
And so it's so mystical sometimes. and knowing that is taking us as close as possible to reality. That's what I understand.
Yeah, that's true. But you can fall down on the other side of the horse, as I sometimes say. If you fall down on the one side or the other side, it's not riding. The other, the other side of the horse is saying, oh, everything is so complex and we have to embrace it, and some kind of spiritual relationship to complexity. This is falling down on the other side of the horse.
Mhm.
Yes. And when we have been young systemic consultants, we love to make it more and more complex. And in the end, people asked us, when should we work instead of dealing with complex?
Mhm.
We overdid it.
Mhm.
And so I understood that systemic competence means also to reduce complexity.
Mhm.
For the moment, to control situations and to develop something real, knowing that how you rule does not is not really relating to every complexity, but it's relating to some experience and then learning out of the experiences. And then you move on and you keep still things as simple as possible, but not being dogmatic with simplicity, but knowing that then it's only 5% of the reality. But these 5% may be enough to try to touch the system at a point with a long leverage.
This is very serious. Anything too much is a problem.
Yeah.
So what I also remember you telling me is about, yes, we need to have this complex understanding or simple understanding. It's also about doing an action and then using that experience to also understand how these movements happen, because then already there is an action, the horse is moved, and then based on that we learn to make further movements. So the action and learning and action are going to hand in hand.
Yeah. And in order to handle with complexity, it is necessary to have some schemata concerning procedures and forms. This is why we have a didactic. Everybody who has who went through our courses learns. They know how to dialogue with each other. They know how to do exercise. They know how to do mirroring. They know how to do workshops, analyzing examples, and so on. And they have a shared style to do so. And because everybody knows how it can be done, the learning culture elements, they really have the chance to deal with the content of the learning. And in the beginning, we thought diversity is good anyway, and everybody can follow the didactic that comes to his or her mind. But then we had a big confusion on the procedures of learning. And very often the complexity competence was totally eaten up by the procedures, and we did not really deal with the content of our learning. This is why, so it's a question what to keep flexible and what kind of rituals to introduce, knowing that they are rituals, but also using the benefit of rituals that everybody knows what to do.
So as a essence, what I'm understanding is do things, learn through them, and don't make what you're doing as absolute.
Right, that's always true.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense for me.